The first thing we do is recognize how thoughts appear in our minds. So our first reflection, leading to the first recognition, is what we call appearances. Recognizing appearances. I started using that term yesterday. When thoughts, emotions, moods, and mind states arise within us, they are actually appearances. They are arising as appearances, like shadows flickering on a wall. The thought flickers into your mind. Have you noticed that? It flickers into your mind. It may stay there a moment and then go. If it has an emotional charge, it may stay longer. If there's a very strong emotional charge, it may catch something else in your mind that's predisposed and start developing on that. But actually, thoughts appear as flickering movements of energy in our minds. Therefore, we call them appearances. Thoughts in themselves do not have substance, any more than a shadow on the wall has substance. But what happens is a well-recognized process. The thought appears, then another part of our mind recognizes the appearance. It realizes there's a thought. So the thought appears there, and then the other part recognizes from here. So we call the thought an appearance within the undercurrent. The undercurrent is that continual flow of mental activity that's going on in our minds all the time. So even now, while you're sitting here, you may be listening, but your mind is still active. Have you noticed that? There's still a background of thinking going on. That's what we call the undercurrent. And when we start looking at the undercurrent, the first thing we see is that it happens by itself. So that's the very first understanding we have about the appearance of thoughts. It is what we call involuntary. The thoughts appear involuntarily. This is extremely important for our mind training, because if we understand this, we do not try to change the thoughts as they appear. And this is where most people make a mistake. When they read these books on mind control and so on, they make the mistake of thinking they should be able to stop the thoughts, to make the mind go blank and all those things. And then, of course, they set out attempting the impossible. Because thoughts will continue to appear involuntarily. And the more we look into it, the more we realize that thoughts are simply an echo of the past. The vast majority of thoughts you are experiencing are simply echo of the past. In certain circumstances, there will be new thoughts when we engage in something like creative thinking or something like that. But even there, the new thoughts are usually extrapolations from something that we already know about. We will start looking at the 6 stages of recognition, of appearances, knowing that the appearances happen within the undercurrent, echo of the past. They are known because there is what we've been calling the observer. Within the mind, there is a part of us that observes the other part. So you can check this for yourself at the moment. At this moment, your observer is aware of this room. It's working through your eyes and your ears. It's aware of this room. It's also aware of the words. It's also aware of the way I'm waving my hand around. It's also aware of its own thoughts. So there are at least 3 different areas of awareness that your observer is experiencing right now. So your observer is aware of the continual arising of the appearances. Then the observer is analyzing them. And it does this subliminally. Before you realize it, your observer has analyzed particularly what it's feeling. So when emotions arise within your mind, the observer scans the emotions. And it knows, that is a pleasant emotion. That is a neutral one. That is an unpleasant one. Then it reacts. If it likes the emotion, it feels good about it. If it doesn't like it, it feels bad about it. So, you have the situation where let's say I feel bad. Then I feel bad about feeling bad. Have you ever had this happen to you? It's quite interesting, isn't it? It's a double whammy. And interestingly, the initial feeling bad is usually only around about 10 or 15%. The added feeling bad about feeling bad adds somewhere around 85% to it. So it's a much more powerful experience than the initial feeling bad. So, although the observer observes, it does not observe impartially. It observes with what we call preference. So the observer is always wanting to get what it wants, wanting to avoid what it doesn't want, and not wanting to know about what's boring. Those are the three primary modes, and then they combine into various permutations. But basically it's wanting to get what it wants, not wanting to get what it doesn't want, not wanting to know about what is boring. And it's on that basis that the observer is constantly reacting. Now, built into that observing process is another very important factor, and that is sense of self. The sense of self is built into the observer. And this is why this feeling of me, this is me here. This is me having a feeling. This is me having a sensation. This is me feeling unhappy. This is me feeling confused. When we start breaking it down, what we can discover is a constant flow of activity, appearances within the undercurrent, reactions within the observer, a thought of self within the observer, and reactivity. But at no point do we discover a separate identity that is an enduring me. So, thoughts, emotions, moods, and mind states appear, they are perceived, but the appearance is involuntary, which means we cannot prevent them appearing. Second, there is a reaction. As I've said, it's either like, dislike, or neutral. And that reaction implies somebody who reacts, somebody who has been judging. Then the third, the observer is obsessed with the content of the undercurrent. What that means in daily terminology is we are obsessed with what we are feeling or thinking at any moment. We are obsessed by the sort of moods we're experiencing. And normally we don't use such a strong word, but the dictionary meaning of obsession is constant preoccupation. Constant preoccupation. We are constantly preoccupied with how we're feeling, with what we're thinking. And this is evidenced by the fact that the first thing we ask us one another when we meet is, how do you feel? How's your obsession getting on? So this shows the degree of preoccupation, of obsession we have with the undercurrent. I'm always checking to see what thoughts there are appearing in the undercurrent, what emotions are appearing in the undercurrent. And then comes the best part. The appearance is involuntary and it is independent. But when I perceive it, the part that perceives has a natural tendency to identify with. So we automatically and instinctively identify with our thoughts and emotions. That is why we say it's my feeling. You know, one of the most dangerous things you can do in the world is to hurt somebody's feelings. And it's quite interesting to explore that phrase. You've hurt my feelings. Physically, of course, there's nothing there. What in fact I'm saying is, you have violated some aspect of my perception of myself. You've contradicted it, or you've invaded it, or you've negated it. This is how we hurt each other's feelings. It's very interesting what happens. So I have identified with a flickering image in the undercurrent. I've got stuck to it, and then I've built it into my idea of myself. So through identifying with something, we create what they call solidity. It becomes reality. First of all, it was a flickering, passing image. Then I identified with it. Then it became me. So now this flickering experience has become me. That's my identity at that moment. And this is the basis of nearly all our confusion in the world, because we're constantly getting caught up with that.
What's
John?
driving obsession?
Sorry?
What's the driving impulse behind the obsession with content?
What the driving impulse behind the obsession is preference. I'm always wanting to get what I want. So that drives me to look at it. It drives me to want to identify with what I like. When it's what I don't like, I still identify with it because I'm trying to get rid of it, and that causes me to get stuck to it.
And the driving impulse behind the preferences?
Is just wanting. Fundamental to our human condition is a powerful drive to want. Wanting, 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 wanting. And that wanting manifests as preference. I want this, I don't want that, I don't want to experience it. So we're now looking at a very fundamental energy. But remember that wanting and that preference gets caught up with sense of self. So it's me having this, me experiencing it.